The name's Lesage, your chronically Caucasian voice analyst, and today we're gonna hear some great singing. Let's get right into it. Okay, I've only heard Luther Vandross once, and it was with Mariah Carey. Very excited to hear him by himself. I think the tone of his voice is exceptional. So let's get right into it.
I wanna tell you, baby.
I just want to say, anyone coming in with bedazzled shoulder pads like that immediately has my respect. The fact that he sounds beautiful while wearing those bedazzled shoulder pads is just an added bonus.
Missing you, listen you.
This rasp here.
Going through. Missing you, listen.
So to get that rasp there, you basically have to sing with significantly less air. I bring this up from time to time, and I probably should just like record this right now, put it as like a default thing. There is something called the Bernoulli effect, and this is how the vocal folds work, and this is how they come together. There we go. You see, as I blow through those, they come closer together. That's because we're removing the air pressure. We're pushing air out, which lowers the air pressure between the pieces of paper. And so because the pressure on the outside is higher than in between, the folds come together, or the papers and the folds come together. So what a vocal fry is, and what this little a sound, this rasp that we're hearing is it's the vocal folds going like this, slapping kind of together a little bit like that. And it's easier to do on the bottom. You go, that's a fry. But to do it as you ascend, you have to have so little air that your folds are kind of like barely touching together. And that's what he does here. And it's a really cool effect, and it's very difficult to do on demand. Vowels. Vowels are one of my favorite things to talk about. So oftentimes people talk about placement. They talk about placing the voice. They talk about, how important that is. But basically what they're talking about is vowels. What we associate as E, A, O, U is basically us adjusting our vocal tract to highlight certain resonance, right? And human beings are so amazing that these subtle differences in changing the vocal tract are things that we pick up on. Accents, IPA and singing. Like we're really sensitive to it, but really all they are is just different shapes in the throat. That's what a vowel is. And so the reason why I point that out and the reason why it's significant is because not only is it important to sing comfortably, if you don't have the right vowels, it doesn't matter how good your breath control is. You don't place the voice. But it's also responsible for tone. Because what people get it twisted is that the human lips are part of the vocal tract. So if you're shortening the vocal tract, you're going to highlight higher frequencies, and the inverse is true. If you purse your lips, you're going to highlight lower frequencies. So anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is that this is what he's doing in this particular spot, and it's really cool. Also important here, the mic placement. Watch how when he wants to get it brighter, he's going to point it towards the nose a little bit. And he moves it down when he wants to kind of get to the round. Then as he goes lower, he brings the mic closer. I'm going to explain how all this works in just a moment. So whenever we work with microphones, there is a concept called the proximity effect, okay? On this one, it's not plugged in. My condenser microphone is, but usually people are using dynamic mics live. The concept still remains the same. The closer I get to the microphone, the louder the lower frequencies will become. And we can actually look at this through a spectrogram. Okay, so this is a spectrogram. So the way to read a spectrogram is that the intensity of the light is how loud that frequency is, right? So you can hear that you can see that as I come closer. I mean, objectively, these are brighter, right? This is like physics. Please don't. If you're in the comments, save yourself looking super dumb and don't contradict this, because you're gonna look like an idiot. Which I guess anybody in the YouTube comments tends to be sometimes. Anyway, so this is the proximity effect. And what Luther Vandross is doing is he is putting it closer to his mouth when he wants to emphasize lower notes. And so he's doing this in combination with pursing his lips to get an even lower sound. And this is significant because, when we go low, a lot of people, including myself, we lose a lot of power the lower we go. And so to make that sound kind of uniform, like it's not falling off, we can use these techniques to kind of work around the fact that, it's going to be quieter in the low end. Anyway, let's get back to it. Phrase is exceptional. I want to hear it again. From the beginning. Cool. Okay. So sometimes that little fry thing can happen by mistake. So he's in a very, very, very light mix. I hate the word. I hate all these terms. Vocal folds can close all the way, or they can be closed, the fully open falsetto. They can be a little bit together. There's this whole range of motion. And so the air leaking that we're hearing is that the folds are not entirely together. You hear that like hiss static sound? That's air leaking out. And that's what he wants. He has this fry for just a second, and what that is there's this like kind of leaking thing going on, right? And then he wants to bring them much closer together. But the way he's doing that, he's trying to bring them closer together, and then tilting his thyroid cartilage. And what the thyroid cartilage does is that, because the folds are actually nested inside the Adam's apple and connected to the Adam's apple, which is the thyroid cartilage. When you tilt the thyroid cartilage, it will stretch out the vocal folds. So he, as he is trying to ease into more of a sound, there's this little moment where he's not tilting, where the folds are trying to come together, but he's still being gentle. And then he gets the tilt. And that's why there's that little gravelly sound right before his vibrato kicks in. Right? But he goes and addresses it immediately. No one is ever going to be perfect. Right? That's not a realistic ask. And I don't think that's even what we want. Could you imagine if that were people's obsession? It'd be horrid. So what we get from great singers is not perfection. What we get from great singers is how they will work with whatever happens on the fly, right? So he knew exactly how to get out of that and into what he wanted. And I think no one would notice unless they were really, really, really listening. If you ever get classical training, but you want to do other things, be wary of the obsession over, like, quote unquote, the even scale. This is just shy of yodeling.
I fell in love with you.
right? In classical music, that aesthetic is not something that a lot of people like. But it's so important in other genres to be able to like almost like yodel through range and register. And it gives its own unique sound, right? Like that sound, that's kind of like dramatic. It sounds really cool. So just be wary of when people try to correct that out of you. Master of phrasing. These lines are gorgeous.
Before the second show.
I want to go into, because we went into the proximity effect and we talked about extending the vocal tract to get a lower one, to get lower resonance. We didn't talk about the inverse, so let's just bring that up real quick. So I have to use a different spectrogram for this. This one is academo.org. It's a free spectrogram. It's way more sensitive than the one I generally use, but you can see exactly what is going to happen here. The second I retract my lips, all of this starts to come in, right? And so that's what we would consider a brighter sound, quote unquote. Back a little further. So what I like about great musicians is that they can sing. So a really, really, really good singer who understands music can get on a note that will change the key. So this kind of temporarily changes the key, the note that he's on, and that takes like a really knowledgeable musician who is not going to get tripped up by that. And then on top of that, there's a higher larynx here, right? He's not tilting. So inexperienced singers generally hate this sound because it's like the opposite of what they want. But it's not a bad sound, right? Singing is more cause and effect than good and bad. Right? And they hate that sound. Because they want power, they want they think falsetto maybe is a bad thing. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of reason why people don't like that sound when they sing it. But when you have someone who's really, really, really good, they're just going to use it for things that are marvelous, right? So don't ignore it. It's a great tool to have. And look at how he does this. It's so beautiful. And he doesn't, throughout the entire phrase, he doesn't tilt his thyroid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage gives a richer, deeper sound because it goes like this, which extends the length of the vocal tract, so you get lower frequencies. Additionally, because of the stretching of the folds like that, more pressure builds up underneath before the folds open. So it literally makes you louder. One measurement of sound is called sound pressure level, right? So literally the pressure is increasing before it opens the folds. But he doesn't want that. He doesn't want that. So he intentionally doesn't tilt. And then we get this. And then on the low end, he tilts, gets that vibrato in there, and it's beautiful. Very, very uncontrived. Very, very simple. But it's gorgeous because it's so good. And also just the man's voice is incredibly beautiful. To watch some of the more extreme consequences of vowels, Rochelle Farrell is amazing. Samo, God, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced his name. He just sang on the Terrell Million thing, and he does a lot of stuff with vowels that are really cool. But it's just so pretty when you have just like this gentle, straight up, unadorned singing where basically vowels are doing all the coloring and all the work. There is just something else. Like, this is a thing that we just don't run into at all in opera. And it's one of those things where people, like classical trained people, will hear it and they'll be like, well, that's bad. And it's not. It's an aesthetic. And it's an aesthetic that specifically comes from blues and or gospel. So be careful what you call bad, because you're kind of walking a line there.
Don't you remember?
That's actually not the same fry that we've been hearing. This fry is from the false folds coming together. The false folds are above the actual vocal folds, and these little pieces of flesh are mainly large pieces of cartilage, unlike the vocal folds. The vocal folds are very, very tiny, little fragile pieces of flesh. The false folds are cartilage, right? So you can do way more to the false folds, like there's a bunch of stuff you can do with them. Metal screaming uses the false folds, but this is a far more subtle use of it, and you see this a lot in gospel.
Don't you remember?
That. It's a very, very, usually people, the reason why people would say, oh, that's bad, is because it's not efficient, right? But why does something need to be efficient if it sounds good and it's safe? And this is safe. And it's safe because he's doing it very well. You don't want to use a lot of air when the false folds come together. It'll make a whole mess. But listen to how gentle he is when he does it. It's gorgeous. Listen to that rasp. That's gorgeous. Imagine that phrase without that rasp. I don't like it as much, right? It's beautiful. I want to give quick props. Too many singers don't work on their internal metronome. Too many singers don't work on their ability to account for rhythm. And as loose and as gorgeous and as legato and smooth and buttery as those phrases were, they were still in time, which is not easy to do. I want to take a quick look at that phrase. I feel so bad stopping this. It's great, but I want to, talk about what he's doing because it's also extraordinary. So we were talking about mic technique and using mic technique to make things sound consistent and not too different in volume from one another. But he's now using the opposite of that. And what's interesting is that's not quite falsetto. Every time I bring up the F word, and it's funny because actually there's some teachers in academia who do phoniatronics or speech pathology, like people who are basically more on the medical end of things and the scientific end of things, have started calling falsetto the F word, because every time you bring it up, people lose their minds. It's not a bad thing, but it's you can, if you're not shy of playing around kind of in that space, you can do really, really, really cool things. And this is there's a very special thing that I think not a lot of men work with. That is actually something you'd expect far more of from a soprano. Let me actually bring that up. So this is the sound we hear a lot more from women and almost every other genre. And what that sound is it's the vocal folds not being fully adducted. My apologies for the awkward cut there. My wife just came home and she's great, so I like to say hi. So yeah, the vocal folds are not fully adducted here. This is what we would call mixed or head voice. Again, all of these things are on a continuum, right? These are actually pretty terrible descriptors. They're really generalized, okay? So basically what that means, these terms, is that there's some separation. Not a lot, but some. And there could, it's this whole range of motion, right? A continuum. But this slight separation in combination with the thyroid tilt for that vibrato gives us this gorgeous, gorgeous tone. You hear that hiss? That's the air escaping. And the fact that he has vibrato there means the thyroid cartilage is tilting. I make all kinds of like stank faces when I'm watching, but the reason it's exciting is he's actually bringing the false folds a little bit together here. And again, those have a range of motion as well. So if you go, actually, let's take a look at that. That's actually really cool. So there's, I'm going to have the false folds apart, and then I'm going to bring it closer together. No, I don't do a good job of that. I don't practice that often. I sing genres where the false folds are basically always apart. But as you hear and as you can see, there's this like harshness, right? These little dots, these little blips and stuff like that. And this is a very, 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 very technical thing. And it doesn't sound good when I do it because I just never really worked on it. I never really trained it. But the concept is pretty straightforward. And so when we look at Luther Vandross doing this in different parts of his range, particularly in higher parts of his range, you need so much control of your breath. You need so much, because if you put too much air behind it, you can even see how this went flat a little bit, right? It didn't sound good, right? So it's a lot about how good your breath control is. This is what I mean by, like, I hate, when we get a little too rigid about chest head mix. And I much prefer the idea of thinking of it as on a continuum, because when you think of it in that way, look at how playful this is. So we have a glottal, which is, if you hold your breath, and then you just sing a little bit afterwards, it's a glottal, where it's like, kind of does that. So he does a glottal onset. He does, some breathy here, and then he adds vibrato, takes it away. I mean, it's so playful and so elegant. It's great.
And what to say? What can I say?
You decide. Yes, you decide. With the most upvotes, that will be the one that I choose for reacting. But you chose it, not me. I think you get it, right?